In this tutorial, I'm going to be explaining to you exactly how I pick apart someone else's lash set photo, the inspiration photo, and bring it to life on my stunning model. We're gonna dive in depth, so please be prepared. This video is going to be quite extensive. First, we're gonna work on my iPad. I'm gonna walk you through my mental process that I take for every single inspiration photo that I dissect. And from there, I'm gonna put it to the test and bring a set to life on my client. Today, we're gonna create a Strip-Lash set based on an inspiration photo. So here we have it, my inspiration photo and my client. I always get my client to send me photos of their eyes super close up so that I can start inspecting every single aspect of them in order to bring their inspiration photo to life. So first thing I do is start inspecting the inspiration photo. Number one, check out to determine what fan type was used for the lash set. So when I see this lash set here, when I look at these spikes, I see wet lashes. So if you look at the tips here, the lashes themselves, they're not coming to a really tight spike. They're sitting side by side horizontally. So that looks like to me that we need to use closed fans, at least for the spikes. And often when creating strip-lash looks, the base, meaning the bottom layer or every single other lash that exists outside of the spikes, those are considered the base. So next I wanna look, is there a different fan type used for the base shape? In this case, I would say yes, and I can tell because if I look right here between the spikes, I can see that there's a lot of little lashes shooting in all over the place in different directions here, filling in. It's more of like a fluffy type effect. That to me resembles semi-open or open fans. Now, you could probably get away with using any type of open fan for the set. Doesn't matter if they're narrow, semi-open, or wide stem fans. Honestly, what I would do here is just inspect my client's natural lash count and layer count to determine how much fullness I needed. If my clients only had one lash layer, I would likely use open fans so that I could get more of a fluffy covered effect. If my client had lots of natural lashes, you can honestly use whatever you want. Today, I'm gonna go ahead and say we're gonna use narrow fans. My client has tons of natural lashes. If we look down at her lash line here, I'm just gonna zoom in. She has so many lashes and layers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, in some cases probably even more than that. And then one thing to note too is here on that inner corner, you'll notice that there's way more lashes over here around the outer and the middle portion of the eye than there are on the middle. So with any type of mapping, notice this. This is very important because if you're working with a layered map, let's say you have 2, 3 different layers, but you only have one layer on the inner corner, you better adjust your plan in order to suit the number of natural lash layers that you have in every single section. Okay, number 2. Let's look at how many fans we need in order to bring this strip-lash look to life. This is really important too. How many of these wet lashes do we need to create for the spikes? We want to have this in mind because it's so easy to get carried away when you're creating any type of lash look, especially with spikes, to just get carried away and place more and more and more. So for this look, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spikes. That is it. Now, maybe your client's eyes are wider than others, but what I like to do is find the general range. So there's only 6 spikes for her inspiration photo. Maybe her eyes wider, maybe it'll look better with 7 or 8 or 5, just depending on how unique the client's eye shape is and how wide their eyes are. But look at the spacing between. You kind of want to mimic this as much as you can. I really find it best to do this with the client's eyes open. And if I were to look at my client, I'm gonna put dots across the eye that look like this. Okay, to see where I want my spikes to sit and how many will fit with this general amount of spacing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6. Let's see what I actually end up doing when the set comes together, because sometimes you can plan it all out, and when you actually start looking at your client, it might end up working out a little differently, and that's okay. Next up, we're gonna look at how many millimeters of difference we need between our lengths for our spikes and our base shape. Okay, so what I like to do in order to figure that out is I'm gonna use, let's use blue for this. Okay, so there is quite a bit of space between the top of the fans that are used for the base and the top of the spikes. That's quite a jump. So to me, when I see this amount of space, I'm thinking that's probably a good 4 or 5 millimeters. So let's look at the top layer to explain this. So when we talk about the base shape, so we're gonna put a spike here, let's say this is 11, we're gonna put a spike here, 12, a spike here, 13, a spike here, 14, a spike here, 15. I'm just using this for a general explanation. So when we're saying we wanna use 4 millimeters shorter, that means that these spikes that are placed across the top layers, these are gonna be placed first because you wanna utilize whatever natural lashes you have to in order for your spikes to sit where they need to go. So those have to be placed first. Now what you're gonna do is fill in the rest of the top layer with 4 millimeters shorter. So where I place my 11 millimeter spike, next to that is going to be 7 millimeter across the top layer. And then for my 12, it's gonna be 8, for my 13, it's gonna be 9, for my 14, 10, and 15, 11, and so on. So although we often talk about the top layer and the bottom layer, we also mean that you can fill the rest of the top layer in with your shorter lengths. So don't get too caught up on layers. You're gonna look at your top layer first. This is gonna be your general map for your top layer, and then for your bottom layer you can continue with that exact same mapping that you've chose for the rest of the top layer lashes. I'm gonna erase that because that's not my actual map. I just wanted to break that down for you. So just to further clarify on that, the top layer is going to consist of 2 lengths per section, one being your spikes, which are your longer lengths, and those are what you're gonna see, and then one being your base, which will consist of your shorter lengths. Okay, now something I will note about the spikes as well, I'm gonna use another color for this. So the spikes themselves, these are pretty chunky, like very chunky spikes. And this inspiration photo is a Strip-Lash photo, so you can wear virtually anything with a Strip-Lash photo. But when I look at my client Rashi at her natural lashes, they don't all look super, super thick. And I'm not quite certain that her natural lashes are going to be able to hold this dimension for all of the spikes. So I'm probably gonna have to utilize multiple natural lashes in order to bring this spiked effect to life. So you have 2 options here. You can either, for one spike, you can either utilize 2 lashes that sit next to each other like this. And what you'll do is place one spike here and one spike here to create the illusion that those 2 spikes actually are one spike. You can do that. That might actually be good because if you look at these spikes, they are quite wide. So we need them to cover a pretty hefty amount of the lash line. So I would say placing them right beside one another and utilizing 2 lashes that are on the exact same layer would probably be in our best interest. And honestly, if a client has really weak natural lashes, but lots of them, you could even take it to doing 3 side by side if you felt like they needed to be a little chunkier. There's no reason why you can't do this. I think that's what I'm gonna end up having to do for my client today. And again, you can make a plan through and through, but sometimes you have to improvise when you're actually working. The next thing I like to look at with my inspiration photo, let's choose yet another color here, is the spacing that the lash set fills between the tip of the lash set and the eyebrows. See this space here? When clients send me inspiration photos, I have noticed that they often want their lash extensions to meet at that general line. So we need to figure out how to get crafty in order to bring the lash extensions to meet at that point between the lash line and the eyebrow. But the tricky thing is that every client has a different amount of brow spacing. So when I look at my client right here, she has actually a fairly similar brow spacing, which is very uncommon. But I need the lash extensions to reach to about here at their longest points. Maybe a little bit less than that, but pretty close to that amount. So I need to choose lengths based on where I want my lash extensions to reach. And it's gonna be different for everyone. So if someone has a fair amount of brow spacing like my client Rashi does, then you're gonna wanna use longer lengths to reach to that area. Versus if someone has a very low amount of lash spacing, you're not gonna need very long lengths in order to reach to that point. So it is up to you as the artist to choose the right lengths to suit the client's lash needs. No two looks will look the same on two unique clients. And curls too. In order to get your client's lashes to reach to the point that you want them to reach to, do you have to use a curl with lift? Or are the client's natural lashes already lifted? Maybe their natural lashes even basically reach to that point, in which case you would not need a lifted curl. Now it's time to take your knowledge and examine your client's eyes. I find this to be a little time consuming, I'm not going to lie to you. That's why I like to do this before my client comes in to see me. So we've already kind of done that, but let's actually build a map based off of our plan now. This is the fun part where the mapping starts to become a reality. Okay, so first thing, when we look at the inspiration photo, I know that this general shaping is a doll eye. I'm gonna write doll eye. The tricky thing is that in order to create certain shapes on your client's unique eye shape, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna use the shaping that they want for your mapping. The reason why is because we're often fighting against unique eye shapes. So if I were to use a doll eye on Rashi, my client, what's gonna end up happening is her eyes, because they are rounded, very rounded actually. And if I'm to do a traditional doll shape, she's gonna have a really super rounded effect in this area, because if I were to put my longest lengths here, now I'm accentuating this area. So she's gonna have long lengths here, and I'm gonna accidentally decrease my lengths here, and it's gonna get really short really quick. So it's gonna look less like a doll eye and more like a traditional open eye look. So what I'm gonna do in order to give her a doll eye look is, because the eye already naturally opens in this area here, let's split her eye down the middle. It already naturally has an upward lift from the inner to middle section of the eye. So I don't need to offer additional lift here. It's not necessary. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work with C-curl here. The reason why I'm choosing C-curl in that area is because if we look at her natural lash layers, so I'm gonna get rid of some of this so we can really dive into what she looks like beneath all my markings. If you look at her natural lashes, they're not super uplifted, but they're also not downturned. So quite honestly, she is ideal, because no matter what we do, the curl that we choose is gonna look true to the curl that we choose. So what I'm gonna do is break my section in half. Actually, it's gonna look more like this. Okay, so where the eye is lifted, we're gonna do C-curl. Now, to create the illusion that this area sits higher than it does, we're just gonna jump up to CC curl for additional lift in that area. That's gonna make it look like she's getting the same amount of lift across the eye. Next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna use our longest lengths. Even though we're going for a doll eye, not a squirrel eye, our longest lengths are actually gonna sit out here, where the eye descends down. So although we're using longer lengths out here, they're actually gonna look a little bit shorter than this area here, because it's already so lifted on its own. So I think my mapping's probably gonna look a little something like this. So my spikes are gonna go here, and I want my spikes to be quite noticeable. So I'm gonna go 13, because we need lift there, 13. We're gonna do 14 here, 14, and then we're gonna jump to 15 out here. 15 and 15. So that way, this area looks like it sits at least relatively close to the same length as this area here. That was a really bad arrow, but you know what I mean. And then again, with the base shape, we're just choosing 4 millimeters shorter for the rest. So we're just gonna do a little 9, 9, 10, 10, 10, 11, 11. And we'll probably on the very outer corner, because our eye does descend quite drastically here, we'll probably jump down just for the last couple lashes to a 10 millimeter. Okay, so this is my complete plan, and again, I'm totally open to making changes as I work. So we will now dive into the day of our lash set. Firstly, we need to make sure we're using the right supplies for the job. Today I'm working with Lost Artistry's, of course, ultra dark lashes. I'm gonna be creating wet lashes for the entire set using 0.03 diameter lashes. The reason why I'm choosing 0.03 is simply because I've never worked on Rashi's lashes before. So I wanna err on the side of caution weight-wise, but still give her those long length and super high dimension spikes that we need for that top layer. Curl-wise, I'm working with a mix of C and CC curl, and lengthwise for our spikes, we're going from 13 millimeter to 15 millimeter. But remember, on either side of my longest spike, I'm gonna use 1 millimeter shorter. So for my 13 millimeter spike that's gonna sit on the inner corner, I'm gonna do 12 millimeter spikes just alongside so that those lashes last much longer and that she's not having to come in for a fill every single week. The reason why I'm choosing to work with our ultra dark lashes is because I personally love them and they feel so lightweight for my client. Guys, I promise you, if you can create lightweight lashes for your clients that still look dark and they can't even feel their lash extensions, they are never going to go to another lash artist. Now, usually when I'm creating spiked wet lash looks, I will use foreplay across the strip, but I'm not gonna do that today. The reason why I'm not using foreplay across the strips is because if you look at this inspiration photo, you can see that I'm not looking for peaked tips for my lash spikes. Instead, I want them just to be closed fans, just sitting side by side, so a horizontal wet lash look. This is really important. The type of wet lashes you use are gonna create a completely different look. Dimension-wise, with 0.03 diameter lashes, I can go upwards of over 20D. That's so crazy, but that's the beauty of working with really fine diameter lashes. Now, dimension-wise, I'm not 100% sure what I'm gonna work with, but I know it is gonna be mega volume, so I'm gonna be working with over 7D fans for the entirety of the set. Now, it's really important to remember that the amount of lashes you use within each fan is going to create the overall aesthetic for the set. And remember that you have to do the exact same dimension or close to the exact same dimension on one side as you do on the other. If you're using a 7D fan on your left eye and then you put the same spike in the same spot on the right eye, but you use a 20D fan, both of those eyes are going to look so different. Consistency and symmetry is key with any lash look, particularly when your spikes are the focal point. To start, I never skip cleansing, rinsing, and priming. The reason why I do these steps is because I promise you, if you do this for every single client, your connection is going to be much more seamless. The lashes will act magnetic towards the natural lashes, and the retention is going to be much better. And when we're working with strip lash looks like we are today, having a really perfect connection is so important. The reason why is because we need the lashes to be directed perfectly. And if we don't have control over our connection, then we can't perfectly direct and place each of those fans. So it's really important to have that perfect foundation so the lashes connect effortlessly. This is also going to speed up your services. I know it takes a little bit more time in the beginning, but I promise you, retention is going to improve, which means that your fill times are going to be faster, and the connection is going to be much more seamless, which is inevitably going to speed up your services. And even if you still use that amount of time, you will have lashed more natural lashes in the timing that you've used. Before I dive into actually lashing or mapping on the iPads, I need to first decide where I want my spikes to go. The only way I can do that is by looking at my client with their eyes open. I have them look straight ahead so that I can see exactly how the eye shape sits so that I can adjust my lengths and spikes accordingly. For this kind of map, I like to put dots where my spikes are gonna go because these are the emphasis area, but you can do anything that works well for you. This is something about a map that's really important, is that it doesn't have to look like anything. As long as it reminds you of your unique plan, that is all that matters. But I like to put dots where my spikes are because I need those to be perfect. So her outer corner of her eye does descend down quite a bit. Her eyes are very rounded. I would say more almond actually, but quite open in the middle. So in order to give her a doll type effect, I'm really going to, from this point forward, I'm gonna draw emphasis towards using longer lengths in this area because they're going to naturally look shorter as the eye descends down. So for a traditional doll eye mapping, I might use my longest lengths closer to the middle of the eye. But for this eye shape, because the outer part does descend down, if I'm to extend the same length as I use on the middle of the eye, all the way to close to that outer corner, then it's gonna look pretty doll-eyed anyways. Versus if I used my longest lengths in the middle of the eye, where the eye sits open already, then I descended my lengths down. I started jumping down in lengths on that outer corner. Then what's gonna happen is it's gonna look really long in the middle and super short on the outer corner. So be very cautious of that. So what I'm gonna do is put my first spike right here, and the eye is naturally open so much already. So I'm gonna start with my 13mm spike right there, and then I'm gonna space over to 14, evenly spacing them as best you can. 14, 14, 14, because we're still on the highest part. And I'm actually, this sounds crazy because I'm not creating a squirrel eye, but her lashes are lifted on this part as well. I'm actually gonna go 15mm for my last couple spikes out here. 15, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then for my outer corner spike, my very last one, I'm gonna jump back down to 14. I might even jump down to 13 because the eyelashes also kind of tilt down on that very outer corner. So I do want to avoid drooping, but we'll have a look at the set halfway through once I'm finished the top layer to see what the lengths are looking like. So I actually only ended up doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spikes, even though the lash set that we looked at had 8. But again, everyone's eyes are so different, so you just modify in order to suit your client's unique features. Tweezer-wise, you are definitely going to need a really good volume tweezer with a solid sweet spot, especially when working with 0.03 diameter lashes. Doesn't matter if you're working with wet lashes, handmade volume, you need a good quality volume tweezer that is going to pick up your 0.03 diameter lashes. Actually, on that note, If you work with multiple dimensions, such as 0.03 and 0.07, make sure you have a 0.03 diameter tweezer that you use exclusively for your 0.03s, and a 0.07 diameter tweezer that you use exclusively for your 0.07s. The reason why you don't want to use the same tweezer for both those diameters is because your tweezer will eventually get broken in for the higher diameter that you're using. So in this case, I would break my tweezer in if I was using 0.07s and 0.03s. I would break it in for 0.07s, which means that over time, the 0.03s would slip right through the cracks. Isolation wise, I'm working with a Sunset Ultra. This is an all-around good tweezer. The reason why it's such a good tweezer is because it has a soft curvature that can reach over any brow bone, any eye shape, and it has a very tiny pointed tip. Why is the very fine pointed tip important? It's because it makes isolation super easy no matter what natural lashes you're isolating. Let's say you have a client with very fine natural lashes. If their lashes are really fine, you need that sharp pointed tip in order to weave through the really fine lashes that sit in clusters close together. Also, if your client has really curly or really wildly directed natural lashes, then you also need a fine pointed tipped tweezer. Why? Because you need to weave in and out between those crisscrossed natural lashes. If you're looking for a one shape fits all isolation tweezer, this is the go. Now, before I start any service, I always, even though I've already disinfected my tools, I always give them a quick dip in Glue Gun. That just makes sure that there's no dust, debris, buildup, or anything, any bacteria or anything on my tweezers. So I actually let them sit in here for a few minutes. Once the tweezers have been disinfected, I take a glue wipe and I make sure there's no product left on any part of the tweezer before I get started. And I go all the way down to the very bottom of the tweezer, because once I start tilting my tweezers downward toward the eye, if there's any product in the back of the tweezer, it's going to roll down and go into the client's eye. So make sure you get all that product out of there. One thing that is really important about Glue Gun is it is an acetone-based product, so it comes with this plastic top. Push it back on because acetone will evaporate if introduced to the air for too long. So make sure that this is back on so you don't look at your Glue Gun and put your tweezers in and there's no product left in the bottle. Okay, it's time to start lashing, but I need to lash the top layer first and then lash the bottom layer. So if you are someone who finds it hard to just look at the natural lashes and distinguish the difference between the top and the bottom layer, don't worry, that's okay. There's a technique for you. I actually love this technique too because it also helps with isolation. So what I'm gonna do is not even draw my mapping just yet. Because I'm only focusing on the top layer first, I'm gonna just isolate that top layer. So I'm using a regular standard iPad. I will say some iPads are not suited for this. I am doing this technique with Lost Artistry Standard gel pads. Those are definitely the best that I've used for this particular technique because they don't leave any residue or anything on the lashes. So you're gonna snug that iPad up to the lash line as close as you can. Now what you're gonna do is take your isolation tweezer and you're gonna make sure you put your head all the way over your client. Lift the lid just a tiny bit. The reason why I snug it up to the eyelid is because if I don't do that, I don't have the contrast beneath the lashes that I pull out in order to see what I'm doing. It'll be like an optical illusion because you'll be able to see her natural lashes poking through, so has to be snug. Now, just the lashes on the top layer, so the lashes that sit closest to you are gonna come out. So you just really gently pull out lashes. Turn your tweezer sideways like I'm doing. And this is gonna expose the top layer. So you're not digging down and pointing the tweezers toward your client's eye. You're just going horizontal, across the eye to pull out the top layer. All right, now we've got that top layer exposed. Now it's time to draw my mapping. So again, we're only drawing the top layer map on here because it'd be silly to draw anything else because we're simply lashing that top layer. So I'm using my dots on the eye to draw my spikes. Direction is very important with sets like this too. Make sure your arrows represent, or your lines or arrows, whatever you want to draw, represent the direction with which you want your extensions to flow. So I am looking for a sunset type shape, so my direction has to represent that shape. And I like to draw my mapping just above the natural lashes because it's too much like black on black. Black natural lashes and black marker. If I'm using a black marker, it just doesn't give that contrast again that I need in order to make a nice proper connection. Make a nice proper connection. Again, these arrows represent direction, but also my sections, which is cool. The middle of the eye, we're gonna start directing up here. See the change in direction just slightly? And now, in order to make my spike stand out for a look like this, we're gonna wanna jump down about 4 millimeters. So, for my base shape and the rest of the lashes outside of the spikes that I'm using, I'm gonna go 4 millimeters shorter. And just to remind myself that I am using 3 lashes per spiked bundle, I'm just gonna put another line here. So what I'm gonna do curl-wise is to the middle point of the eye. So I'm gonna use C curl all the way to this 14 millimeter spike. And then on this part where the eye quickly descends downward, that's where I'm moving. And I'm gonna be putting CC curl, just for a little extra lift. You can see that I've already placed 3 of the spikes. I'm really trying to focus on direction because I need all 3 of these fans per jumbo spike, we'll call them, to direct the same way. They need to look like they're one big spike if possible. The spikes are definitely gonna take a lot of time, so that's okay though, because they're the focal point of the set, so they might take quite a bit of time, but the rest of the set will go quite quickly. I'm just gonna show you here how I create my fans. So I'll just let you watch me create for a moment. Just take note on how I'm holding my hand and the angle that I'm picking up the lashes on, as well as how I'm releasing. So I am using 100% tension and just everything's slow and controlled. Placement wise, I do find for this technique that I have to put my head quite a bit over my client. And I also like to use a free finger to just lift the lid the smallest amount in order to see where the lash grows from the follicle. That makes it more possible for me to see if there's any invisible hairs popping out through, and I can really make a close placement and perfect direction. So I'm at my dot now. So I already placed my CC curl out here. Now I'm going into C curl right here. And you can see that my fans are quite large. I do find when working with wet lashes, it's nice to have a little bit of a fast curing glue. not too crazy, but a little bit fast curing so it connects around the natural lash. And when placing spikes, placement consistency, meaning how close you place each extension to the skin, is so important. The reason why is because if I'm placing one of my fans 0.5 millimeters away from the skin, and then my next fan 1 or 1.5 millimeters away from the skin, the lash that I placed further away from the skin is going to look longer than the lash that I placed closer to the skin. So it changes the length, the look at least, of the length that you're using. Actually, this is a fun little hack that you can have in your back pocket for later, but let's say you're in a little bit of a pickle and you forgot to order 10 millimeter, but you have 9s and 11s. You can actually place your 9s just 1 millimeter further away from the skin to make it look like a 10, if you have to. Just be careful if your client is blonde, because if you were to do that on the bottom layer and you have a blonde lash client, then you might have blonde roots in one area. So you might want to fill that bottom layer with shorter lengths. And although we're placing our spikes right beside one another and directing into one another, we really want to make sure that they're not stuck to one another. Again, another perk of using a fast curing glue when you're using this technique. So you don't have to sit and hold for as long. And for this lash style, I could definitely get away with just using one thicker spike, but I do find that with looks like this, with just one spike being the focal point, unless your client's down to come in for really regular fills, mini fills, then it can be a little bit funky looking at a 2-week fill. When they lose some of those spikes, it definitely looks a little off, like a big gap in the lash line. I like to have conversations with my client before I even commit to doing the set on them, so there's no disappointment. So for example, when someone sends me a photo like this, I'll say, we can absolutely create this. However, it is important for you to know that when you lose one of these big spikes, I do find that the look can change and it doesn't look very nice between fills. However, we can maintain the look by having you come in for regular mini fills. And if you can get a clientele in mini fills, you'll be laughing. Bread and butter. It's also nice to have clients come in for mini fills if they're pickers. The reason why is I find that pickers, they only pick their lashes when they start growing out. So if you can keep the lashes looking super full, that's ideal. Now, the very outer corner didn't have many layers to work with or many lashes. There were only a few sporadic. So just for sake of ease, I did only put 2 lashes out there. It's super common for people to have only 1 to 2 layers on the very outer and very inner corner. So you kind of have to just adjust and roll with it. Because the eyes are quite rounded, not all eye pads are going to fit perfectly. So I'm struggling to see what I'm doing on this inner portion of the eye. So I have to move this iPad in a little bit. I'm gonna try to do it without taking it off. Oh, there you go, that was easy. But you might have to take it off and readjust it, but that worked perfect. And if you find it hard to get to the inner or very outer corner, particularly the inner corner when using techniques like this, I highly recommend crystallizing before placing them, because then you can hold closer to the tips. You can actually hold on to the tips, which makes connection much easier in small areas because your tweezers don't get in the way. So now that my spikes are all complete, I'm moving into my base shape. Again, I'm still working on that top layer only. So in order to make the spike stand out, as I've said, you need to work with at least 4 millimeters difference in length for this type of look. So I am going to fill the rest of the lashes in with 4 millimeters shorter. I do find for some strip lash looks, just to add a little of my own spice to it, I like to blend a mix of 4 and 5 millimeters difference on that top layer for my base shape. That just adds a little extra texture. Actually, in the inspiration photo, the person didn't do that, but I'm doing my own thing. It's important to put your own spin on every set that you do. Everyone has a little bit of a different technique and a different style. It's actually kind of cool because you can create the exact same mapping using the exact same products as someone else, and it is going to look a little bit different when you do it versus when the other person does it. I like that about lashing. It's like a piece of art. If someone has downturned natural lashes, it's going to be really hard to avoid getting stickies, so it's extra important when using this technique to slightly lift the eyelid when you're placing each extension. Otherwise, the natural lashes are going to push against the iPad. And I am using our magnification glasses. I find these to be a game changer. I can't believe that I never used them before. I find that my sets have improved so much because I can actually see each eyelash so much better, which helps me with placement, isolation, all aspects of lashing really. And our magnification glasses only magnify 1.5 times, so it's not strenuous on the eyes the way that some of the magnification glasses out there can be. My first introduction to magnifying glasses were like dentist glasses, and my first day using them, I couldn't see after. I had to drive home and I had to take like a half an hour in between because my eyes just were not adjusting. It was pretty intense. But I think I was using like 4 or 5 times magnification, which is a little aggressive. And again, even though the base shape isn't the focal point of the set, you still want it to look really clean. So you need to focus on direction. Okay, so I am feeling like the shape is coming together for my top layer, but I don't want to get lost in it and complete 100% of the top layer without making sure that it's the right shape. The reason why I don't want to fill the entire top layer is because if I need to put some more fans in somewhere, that'll be really crucial for the shaping of the set, then I need to make sure that there's natural lashes to lash. So I'm gonna have a look. I'm gonna use my inspection mirror first, and then I'm actually gonna take the iPads off. And this is crazy, but I do this for really intense set sometimes where I will take the eye pads off, I'm gonna give her a nano mist, and I'm gonna look to see what the lashes look like with the eyes open, because honestly, you truly can't tell with the eyes closed how the lashes are gonna look when the client opens up. So sometimes, especially if the outcome of the set is very, very important, I will just stop the service. It's also nice because the client can take a little pee break if they have to, grab some water, and then dive back in. And honestly, this set might take me upwards of 4 hours if I'm lashing 100% of the natural lashes, but I'm gonna do it quicker by lashing the top and bottom layer and just doing what I can on the middle one. So I would probably book about 2.5 hours for this set, but that's as an expert. You can book longer. There's nothing wrong with taking 4 hours to do a set as long as the outcome's perfect and the client knows that you're gonna take that long. Let's see here. So satisfying. Nano Mister is just gonna help cure the glue and soothe the eyes. You could go ahead with Super Bonder at this point, but honestly, I don't know what happens when you put Super Bonder on the natural lashes and then you go in and connect again. So Nano Mister, I know it's gonna dry, it's going to soothe the eyes, and I know that nothing funky is gonna happen. Sometimes I have to go back in, remove some lashes, put some new ones on there if the spikes don't look right, if they're misdirected. This is the longest part of the set, and then filling the base is super easy. But you gotta make sure this looks perfect. It's worth the extra time. Okay, so my top layer is 100% complete. Now we need to make sure that the bottom layer is also complete. So if you want to, you can write your map out on the iPad for the bottom layer. My mapping is pretty basic. I'm just gonna write it here for you real quick. Our mapping looked like this, and again, we did split the eye down, CC on the outside, C curl on the inner. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. Again, just reminding me what I'm doing. So now I'm taking an iPad and I'm gonna take just the tips of the lash extensions. You don't need all the way to the base, just the tips. And you're gonna pull back those lashes. And by doing that, you're gonna expose the unlashed bottom layer lashes. I do find, especially with round-eyed clients, that you want to make sure the eye's closed. So you might have to adjust and use less pressure here. Closing the eye. I do find it best to kind of use a little bit of pressure on the iPad just to keep the eyes closed, but not too much. You can ask your client how much pressure is enough versus too much, because it doesn't feel nice when someone's really pushing down on your eyeballs. So just make sure you're touching base with your client to ensure it's not hurting. Sometimes it can be best to connect your extensions from the bottom of the natural lash when using this technique. But there's no right or wrong. You can connect to the top, side, bottom, wherever you get the best connection. For looks like this, it's important that you super bond after the service. The reason why is because we want to make sure that those fans keep their shape, especially the spikes, because if they start losing their shape or changing shape between fills, the whole set is going to look off. So super bond to keep your fans shaped, lessen the likelihood of irritation, and also just create a more flexible, long-lasting hold. And even though I'm super bonding, I'm always gonna finish my service with a Nano Mister just because it feels amazing for the client.